Hello everyone and welcome back to a podcast of one's own, GenSoc's very own podcast. It's the first podcast this year, this academic year. And before we get into the actual podcast, we just like to welcome everyone back to university. We hope everyone's settling in okay. And we're just going to do a quick introduction round, just saying our names and our roles and how long we've all been on GenSoc for. So, Esther, would you like to start?
Cool. Yeah, I'm Esther. I'm your president at the moment and was last year as well. So I've been in GenSoc since it started. So this is going into the third year of GenSoc. That's crazy and amazing.
Yeah, I'm Victoria. I'm the secretary. I've also been in GenSoc since the beginning, so I'm really excited to start this third year with GenSoc.
Yeah, I'm Aurora, and I've also been with GenSoc since my first year, so it's also going into the third year now. Yeah.
And I'm Katarina. I'm postgrad publishing student, and it's my first year on the committee, but my second year in GenSoc, and I took over from Nicole, who was the communications manager last year, and she did an amazing job, and those are big shoes to fill, but I'll do my best. So,
I forgot to add, I'm the events manager.
That was Aurora, by the way.
That was me.
Also quite important.
And we're missing John, who is our
right,
treasurer. Yeah, he's our treasurer.
He will join us for another episode, so you'll be able to hear his thoughts as well. But maybe next week or the...
Hear something from our blue quota. Okay, so, intro to feminism. I don't know about you, but when I tell people I'm a feminist, the first question always is, oh, why are you a feminist? Like, how did you get there? What made you want to be involved with gender equality activism in the first place? And so for this podcast, I just thought we'd talk about our journey to where we are now and about the steps and the phases we all went through, because let's be honest, we weren't born feminists.
No.
So yeah, we're just gonna break some of the ideas down for you to give you an idea where we come from, what the society is about, and also what you can expect to discuss this year in our weekly sessions on Tuesdays. And yeah, we'll be using some key terms and concepts, but don't worry if you don't know what that means, because we'll explain everything for you. And also on a side note, I wanted to add that the idea for the podcast came from another podcast, one of my favorites. It's a German one called Feuer und Brot, which means fire and bread. So yeah, just we don't want to be stealing any intellectual property. If you're a German speaker, go listen to it. It's amazing. I love it. And yeah, so let's just dive into it.
Yeah.
First phase, the Femi what phase. What did you all think when you first heard about feminism? Because for me, I was just kind of like, well, why shouldn't women be equal to men? Because they are in terms of the law, and they can vote and drive and work. What else do they want?
Mostly.
Why do
they
we
are
need?
in the law.
In the law, yeah,
most of the time.
Mostly, yeah. But that's what I thought when...
Yeah.
I first heard about feminism. I was like, why do we need it?
Anyone?
I mean, for me it was a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
I've explained a lot of times that I was born in a family where my mom, she was never like feminist out loud. Like, she never used the term feminism, but I think that's more generational than anything else, because she's now started using it too. But for me, it wasn't a moment where I found out about it. It was more of a thing that I've always held these ideals of women's equality and empowerment and all the things that now I understand come into feminism. It was just more of a moment of understanding that there was an entire movement that I could join and be part of and learn from, because there was so much that I needed to learn. I think my first feminist phase was very much the I'm not like the other girls phase.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've definitely grown out of that, but I think that was the biggest the key thing of my feminist phase was I'm not like the other girls. I'm better than them because I'm a feminist.
Did you ever, like any of you as a child, had did you ever have the feeling that you were treated differently because you're a girl? Because for me, it wasn't really like that. Like, I was always told, you're a smart girl, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But then, like, I remember some teachers and my parents were saying, maybe later on in life, you will find things more difficult because you're a woman, or you will be treated differently because you're a girl or woman. And I always thought, that's not really a thing.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think for me it was like I never really grew up with that so explicitly kind of apparent in my life that girls and boys... Well, I mean, in school, yeah, definitely girls and boys were treated differently, especially, I mean, in friend groups, but by teachers as well. It's very much the whole, like, boys will be boys kind of thing. Yeah. But I don't think I actually thought that much about it until later on. For me, I think it's been more about noticing patterns in my life, but also in society, where I feel like the playing field is just not equal for girls and boys, or women and men. And then from there, I kind of like it grew out of that, rather than feeling like I was being mistreated individually in any way.
Yeah, I don't think I had any. For me, it was just always a given kind of thing. I'll just like do whatever I want, as long as it's legal. But like, it wasn't ever a thing where I was like, yeah, I can't do that, or I can't do this one. So my parents always like brought me up very like, do whatever you want to do. Like, what's your goal? Reach that one, that kind of stuff. So it wasn't really a thing where I was like, well, I can't do that, or where I was like, oh my god, I'm a feminist this moment. Like, it wasn't like a momentaneous realization. It was more of a, over time I just realized, well, it's not everywhere like that, and not everything as well. So yeah, I don't know.
And that we, as like white women in this day and age in this country, are still like very privileged.
Yeah.
Compared to other women who might have experienced discrimination due to their like looks or sexuality or race or whatever, class, so many factors that come in. But why do you think feminism has, I don't want to say a bad reputation, because I think it's changing a lot, but when I first, like, my association with the term feminism was like, oh, those are just, I don't know, like angry spinsters who just can't get a man, and that's why they do it, like that's why they, like, all the stereotypes that surround the term. Isn't that why so many women just kind of project it without really thinking about it?
I think it is. I think it's definitely based on those stereotypes, but to me, it's always been just really... I never had that phase where I was like, oh no, feminists are just these blah 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 angry women, and I'm like, yeah, so maybe they are, and that's totally, like, that was never... that just made sense to me in a way. Like, I didn't really see that as being... I'm like, yeah, of course they're angry because this and this.
Yeah.
Like, that makes sense to me. I don't understand why that would be something bad necessarily.
Yeah.
They've got a good reason to be angry.
Exactly.
And I just remember being like 13 maybe, and my girlfriends, they would be like, oh no, I wouldn't say I was feminist, but
I mean,
like,
I
believe in
for,
gender
like,
equality.
But...
And I remember just being there like, these are my best girlfriends, and I was just like... I just remember that moment, and I was like, I obviously might have exaggerated a little bit in my head, but I was like, first of all, I don't understand that, but second of all, I think it's also, like, they don't even, that was probably subconsciously for them as well, but that they didn't want to associate with that word because it would put them in an even more exposed position than they already were, being girls. So like, being an outspoken girl, that's like even further away, but then that's also still perpetuating the position, that like the disadvantaged position that they had, which was so like confusing to me. But I was not old enough to really like make it a thing. I just really didn't talk about it that much. But it was very clear in my head.
Also, I think anger is perceived differently when it comes from women or when it comes from men.
Yes.
Men are like perceived as assertive, and they know what they want, they know where they're going, and women are like, oh my god, don't stop being so loud, you're hysterical, or whatever.
I don't want to mention her 9 minutes into the podcast, but I think Taylor Swift said
I
something.
was literally gonna say,
Really?
have you listened to The Man?
Yeah, I think Taylor
Oh,
Swift
yeah.
said something about it because obviously I don't remember exactly what she said, but she said something like, men are allowed to have a response when I do is just perceived as like being angry. Obviously she put it in a much better way, and it was like 2 sentences, and it was like direct and amazing, and I'm just not as well spoken as she is, but I think she talked about it, especially with the promotion of the new album, considering the backlash that she received for Reputation and her becoming outspoken for the first time. I think that's what she said, like, why are men allowed to have angry reactions? And they're allowed to, because
And they're
people are allowed
immediately
to
so
have
they're
angry
like,
reaction.
yeah.
But when I do, then all of a sudden the media can't deal with that, basically.
Maybe that should be our like little jingle in the beginning.
yeah. I think,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, no, let's move on to the second phase, the cool girl phase, which I think we can all relate to. It's a bit heteronormative, I'll say, but yeah, so for those of you who haven't read Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, there's also a movie, which I can recommend. It's quite a good in the depth of the novel. Yeah,
Never seen
but
it.
the book is just, the book I think is much better, obviously, but yeah. So just go read it or listen to it as an audiobook. And yeah, the term cool girl describes a very particular yet familiar archetype. And I found a quote which summarizes it quite well. It says, "Be chill and don't be a downer. Act like a dude but look like a supermodel."
Yeah.
And yeah, Gillian Flynn herself, she said, "We all know what we're talking about when we're talking about cool girl. It's putting up with machismo bullshit and smiling and nodding when you know better."
Yeah.
That's literally it. Especially
That's
when you
it.
know better.
When
part.
you know better. But why? I mean, I feel like we can all relate to that, or we all know someone in our lives who went through that phase or is still in it, or we never really get rid of it in a way. But why is that? Why do you think? Because I feel like men seem to think that this girl, this stereotype actually exists.
Well, men think
While
Whereas
Just-
underneath,
men think that
You're
all of
very
their
aware.
fantasies exist. Like, they make a fantasy of a woman in their head, and they expect every female to like adopt to that. Sorry, that was just me being
Yeah,
like.
no. But the question is why women are willing to actually try and fit into that role.
Because it's
Or-
easier.
Is it?
I think. I mean, internally, identity-wise, I don't think it's easier. I think, but when it's with other people, for like, in Italian we have this way of saying, which is like for quiet living, so just to let things be as they are.
to like not cause a disturbance.
Yeah, so that's easier because, and especially when I was younger, and I think this cool girl phase comes when you're a bit younger too. You're in that moment where like everything is trash already because you're in high school and you hate life, and all you want to do is fit in, and it's hard to fit in as this loud, obnoxious individual. I can tell you that from experience.
Not obnoxious.
But no, I mean like from a political sense as well.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
you should never let anything slide. But my high school class was full of these cool girls archetypes, and I thought, you are so smart. Why can you not like be on my side when I'm talking about like, why should we accept this or that happens to us? And you're so smart. You're such an intelligent girl, so empowered in some ways. And like I have a specific person in my mind right now, but then she would never like loudly be on my side, or she would just be like, but boys will be boys.
Yeah.
Because I think, and this is like absolutely like stereotypical and like a very mean girl setting too, but it's that fear of losing that position of not power but of admiration from the boys and the other girls, where we are in that position of appeal to both.
But the
in
thing
both
is,
ways.
I think a lot of that appeal from the girls comes from the other boys.
Oh yeah,
Appeal. Like
I mean,
if you didn't have the respect and sort of attention of the boys, then the other girls wouldn't look up to you in that way.
yeah, of
So
course,
it's
like,
always
it's all
like-
intertwined.
So cool girls, would you say cool girls act or trying to act more like guys because we're constantly told being a girl isn't good, like being a boy is way better. When we say like, oh, because you fight like a girl, you run like a girl, those are insults, right?
Yeah.
No one wants to hear
I think
that.
it's like very complicated, actually, this like cool girl stereotype, because very rarely do I think that the girls, including myself at this point, were like, you're not unaware of it. You know that you're making this decision. And what you kind of tapped into before, like we were saying, that it's easier maybe to fit into that role until you've broken out of it, and then you realize, wow, it's actually much easier to not be in that role. Yeah. But it seems too scary before, like it doesn't seem like it's possible for it to be
at the time
easy.
It feels like you can do it, but looking back, when you think about your, I don't know, your boyfriend or whatever, he expects you to be home with him on a Saturday night and eat like 5 pizzas and a burger, but obviously you have to maintain size 0 and look like a Victoria's Secret model. Like that is, it's impossible.
I think it's also the appeal of the cool girl is also just because we're pushed constantly to appeal to men.
Yeah.
So as the cool girl is kind of like pushed to be that ideal. You're like the guys, but you look amazing. That kind of like
like all the positive
ideal
attributes
thing.
of men,
so
but also desirable
like,
by men.
Subconsciously, you're like, okay, well, somehow everyone, like, it's always pushed that everyone needs to have someone. So it's just like, okay, let's appeal to the men.
It's also true.
To like
it's
get that
also
one.
what we see in series and movies all the time. But we can't forget that those are directed by mostly male directors. Of course. So the male gaze comes into the game as well, where women are portrayed, like from a male perspective, as, or presented or represented as sexual objects who appeal to like a male viewer.
I also think that's the woman that, according to the male media, is the empowered woman. The woman who can do it all, that has it all. The woman who is fit and she goes to the gym, but she can also like burp and like be comfortable in her sexuality to the extent that the males surrounding her can benefit from her comfortability in her sexuality. You know, the character, the person. I was actually, sorry, this is like, I was talking about this with my lecturer today for my dissertation, and she was actually the one who introduced me to this concept of saying, like, how many women in advertisement, in commercial, in movies and everything are empowered because they can do it all, you know, because they are not only they're feminists, but they also, you know, like, but they're also not. Not only they are like strong and can like lift weight, but also like to wear makeup. You know, it's this idea of like the empowered woman, according to the media, is the cool girl.
Yes,
you know?
But I think you really touched on the important part earlier, which is that this is seen as something positive, as long as it can be benefited from by. But what am I saying?
I know what you mean.
Yeah, as long as it's a benefit to men, like as long as it doesn't go too far.
Exactly.
As long as you're not stronger than the men, you're allowed to be. Yeah. Not equally strong, but
I think it's very like it's really difficult to kind of mentally get over the kind of hindrance of being like just embracing being disruptive. And trust, like there's a lot of trust in it as well, I think, at least in my journey. As long as you start breaking out of a stereotype like that, you have to trust that you're going to meet people and have new like other friends and connections that will meet you there. But I think that's the scary part, for especially when you're younger. You're like, if I start speaking up on these things, I'm going to like lose all my friends because I'm going to be so uncool and annoying and such a disturbance.
Like the quote,
and then
you
you're
don't
still
want to
like
be
that
the downer.
fear.
Yeah. Exactly. So let's move on to the next phase. I called it, the podcast list to called it the glass ceiling, or they talked about the metaphor of the glass ceiling, which is a concept I feel most of us have heard of, but I'm just going to quickly summarize what it is so we're all on the same page. So the glass ceiling is a metaphor used to represent an invisible barrier that keeps a given demographic from rising beyond a certain level in hierarchy. It's often used in reference to barriers in careers of women or people of color or other minorities. It just prevents them from advancing to the top of, let's say, a corporate company or whatever. And the invisible barriers that I talked about are a metaphor to describe the circumstances that women or minorities undergo when they're trying to simultaneously advance in their career and also in their private life. So to juggle your job or your family, your relationships, everything at the same time. Because let's be honest, if you're a woman who works full time, which is what you need to do to be independent from your partner, and you have a family, you will be asked, oh, but who takes care of the kids? What about your kids? Who picks them up from kindergarten or school? And men are very rarely, I would say, asked that question.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And what I like about this metaphor is that it's not just about the job. For me, it came to a certain point in my life where I just realized that I am treated differently because I'm a woman. And that's not just in like a career or a job, but also in your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking about, relationships or just body shaming, slut shaming, sexual harassment. The list goes on and on.
All of it kind of ties in really. For me, when you like define the glass ceiling in that way, like what is it that keeps kind of keeps women from reaching that last step or whatever. Yeah. To me, it's really, the way I see it is that the last kind of puzzle in there that we're missing is that we're still all struggling with internalized sexism, and I think that is the glass ceiling for us. Because if imagine if all women just did not internalize misogyny, we would, and like I believe we would be able to, like, we would have the power to get to that stage then. Yeah. But I think it's our, like, what we're taught that's ingrained in ourselves of our own limits that makes it much more difficult. And that goes into, like, feeling like you're a good mother, shaming yourself for not being a good mother, for not having the perfect body in society's standards, for not being a good enough wife, for not excelling in your career. It's not just that other people are...
with your friends, everything, yeah.
Because I think people could crush through those barriers if they were kind to themselves. But if you're judging yourself for all those things while everyone else is judging you as well, then there's like no possible way to kind of break through it. I think you have to stop the cycle of internalizing it in order to deal with the society imposing it onto you.
And for that, I think it's crucial that the perception changes, and that can only happen if there's a representation, an appropriate one, in the media and in society, which now is really getting a bit better, but still...
It's funny that you're... Like, it definitely is getting better, but now that I thought of it just now, is it just me, or is it, like, getting slightly worse again? Like, you know what I mean?
Like, getting worse.
It's getting better, but there's a backlash as well. Like, it's very,
there's always a backlash.
I think it might
be
because
stagnant. Like, there was, like, a moment, maybe 2015, I would say 2016, where representation was so big in the media. Everything was on that.
And everything.
Right, and everything was so big, and then it reached a point, and now we're still at the same level, but it's like, we should progress though.
Yeah,
like,
we're on the same level,
not enough anymore, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like I don't want to rush through this so quickly, but now that we're at it, I'm going to talk about the next phase, because it ties in really well with what you just said. Feminism as a trend. Because I feel like when feminism entered pop culture, and a very defining moment, I think, for everyone was when Beyoncé's Flawless came out, where she quoted, "We should all be feminists."
Yeah. Everyone should.
And that was empowering. Like, the entry, definitely. Like, it's a really good book. It's written by a Nigerian author, and I had to write this down because I can never memorize it. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
Yes,
she's incredible.
Yes, she is incredible, and so I think the upside of the whole Beyoncé, like, feminism and pop culture thing was that people just gained confidence in using the label for themselves, and that's obviously a good thing, and people found out who maybe wouldn't have read the essay.
Yeah.
And
I think sorry.
No, I was just going to say that obviously after that there was a lot more effort to incorporate those ideas in series and movies and stuff. I'm just thinking about the show Girls. I don't know if you've watched it.
Yes,
it's produced by Lena Dunham and starring Lena Dunham. And
very controversial at this
very
point.
controversial, and I agree. But for me was kind of had like a Sex and the City moment, which obviously isn't the most feminist show, but at the time it was like it was a breakthrough that women talked so openly about their sexuality. And I felt like that was a bit like Girls for me, because they talked about like everyday, like everyone's like normal problems that concern real women. And it showed that our problems are also worth talking about. Just in series and movies.
I think that is something that's super interesting right now, especially with like the whole movement of sex positivity and women sort of reclaiming their sexualities, and that is a big that's a big step, and that's been a big movement and still is. And then it plateaus again, but you keep thinking about it, and then you're like, oh shit, we're still now appealing to the male gaze, even though we might be performing this activism and engaging in it for our own liberation, but we're still like, even though we don't, against our will or not, still catering to the male gaze. So it's like, it's just I mean, it's a journey.
I mean, there's always like an upside and obviously a downside as well, because when we talk about feminism as a trend, we can't forget about like capitalism, and that feminism was sort of commercialized by a lot of companies, and all of a sudden you had the girl power t-shirts everywhere, and it was like all of a sudden it was cool to be a feminist, but at the same time not really, because whenever something's capitalized, I feel like it weakens the movement.
It was cool to be a feminist, but and then you have a disclaimer. I think that
feminist, but I don't hate men.
That disclaimer is just like the most annoying thing in my life.
I think that was a really good move on the capitalist side to claim the movement themselves. So you can be a feminist at their own terms. You can be a feminist in the way that H&M gives you the definition. You know what I mean? But if not, if you're like, but then you're otherwise you're just a feminazi,
like
you know,
a shallow thing, where there's no meaning
it's a shell
behind
of the
anymore.
movement, because people don't know about it anymore. It's just, oh my god, I love that mug, I'm gonna buy that mug that says girl power or the future is female. Like, and what's the meaning behind that?
We can't forget that feminism isn't a trend, and that we have to defend our rights and fight for our rights constantly if we don't want to go back. And I mean, if we look at the fact, like who's the most powerful person in politics at the moment, like the freaking president of the United States is a racist, a fascist, and a misogynist, and
I'm gonna cry.
I don't want to make you cry.
No, but like, it's just
you know what I mean? Like,
I know.
Sometimes you think
it's
about
really
it,
like never. I think a lot of the danger of the sort of capitalist claim on the feminist movement is that it can then be the word feminist, and being a feminist can be claimed by anyone, but no further sort of research is done. Like, no one actually goes back and reads that essay. No one actually educates themselves on that issue. They're just like, okay, but I'm putting this label now, so like we're cool. I'm now like politically correct. Whereas I mean, what I think GenSoc especially, like what we're about and what we want to, and at least what I always hope to get out of our sessions is to kind of like get past that part of feminism and get through to the history of it and the theory and the philosophy and like and the actions.
But talking about politics, I think we can move on to the next phase, which I think we all I feel like I'm very much still in that phase, the killjoy phase, where once you've seen all the issues, you can't unsee it, and all of a sudden you feel like misogyny's everywhere, everything's potentially problematic, and you feel like, oh my god, is it ever gonna get better, or
oh my god, I feel like I go in and out of that phase. Like, it's a roller coaster. Every day I'm like, oh no, I'm so angry, I'm so motivated, we're gonna make this right. And then some days I'm just like, there's too much. We can't fight this. You know, and those are the worst days, I think. When it's just like, should I just go back to the cool girl stereotype again? Because it's easier, because this is draining all of my energy. But then it's kind of like, then you get up on the roller coaster again and you're like...
But then I feel that there's not really a way back for me anymore.
No.
Like, I could never not have an issue with, like, all of the things that I see and that make me really angry. And I'm just trying to use that anger because it's powerful. I feel like women's anger is what drives movements forward.
It is powerful.
Yeah, I think once you're, like, aware of everything, you can't really, like, just blend it out. Like,
no. I think the cool girl phase is really like, that's when you're internally dipping your feet in the water, like you're aware of some things, but you're like keeping yourself consciously in denial. But once you've passed that, then you can't really go back to like denying it. Like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
It also like constantly unfolds more. Like, the more you, like, you know something, and then you're like, you can't stop thinking about it. And then you notice that pattern somewhere else, and you're like, shit. Like,
but I feel like it's also, like, GenSoc's also a great place to connect with people who come just from different point of views. And I mean, feminism doesn't equal feminism. There are a lot of different ways to practice it, and a lot of priorities obviously people have, and especially when we talk about intersectionality, I always find it very eye-opening to talk to women of color in my life, my queer friends, because I feel they just give me a different perspective on certain issues that I haven't really considered yet.
I feel like that taps into what Esther was saying too, like the fact about, like, everybody can claim the idea of feminism, and there is, I think, my killjoy phase is deepened and made worse by the realization that there is so much disinformation, I don't know how to say it in English, but false information that is spread around by people who claim that they are feminists, but they do nothing but damage the movement, because nobody actually goes and read it. Nobody actually is, like, in activism, and then you read, like, and I'm talking about, like, all different, like, point of views. I'm just, like, referring to one specific thing. I'm just saying in general, like, because it's become such a trend, it's just it becomes confusing, because then the only thing that the media pays attention to is the
superficial version
of feminism, the hashtag all men are trash, and then that's all that gets picked up by the media with all the, you know, like, the type of thing, whereas there is so many more, even the, you know, there are so many other hashtags that are valuable, like, yes, all women, you know, like, all other things that are basically, you know, saying the same thing, but they're looking at it from a different perspective, from an actually informed and aware perspective. So I think currently my phase and my constant struggle is trying to make my way through this movement that has become so vast and so not defined anymore.
I think people are picking too much at words. If people paid less attention to the, like, terminology that we use and made an effort to think about the actual, like, thoughts underlying it and the philosophy and the theory about it, then we wouldn't have a problem. Then people would be like, I mean, we can discuss feminism over different languages, for example, and then the terminology doesn't matter because we're on the same level of we know what we're talking about, because we've all, like, you know, we can meet on the theory level of things, but that doesn't really happen when it's so, like, media centered and hashtag based. It becomes all about the words.
Yeah, because I've met so many people who are like, I'm all for gender equality, but I'm not a feminist. I'm like, well, it's just a terminology thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter in the end, as long as you have the actions. Exactly.
Like we were, when you asked them, why are you not a feminist? Oh, because I don't hate men.
Yeah. And I was like, well, me either,
where,
but...
Like, where did you get the idea, babe? Like, who told you that?
I mean...
I didn't receive the memo from the leader of feminism that we hated men today. Like, I never got that news, but that's what I'm trying to say. Like, it's so full of different voices, and which is good, because obviously we want to make it accessible to everybody, but at the same time we're losing the core, we're losing the fight, why we're doing these. Like, we're not just set here so that we can reward ourselves with a mug that says the future is female. We're doing this because we want to, like, have a better future for us.
That's important.
For our daughters, for everybody, for
just be able,
you know,
just
like
be able
our
to breathe,
sons,
you know what I
for
mean?
everybody. Like, it's not just like about us, you know, sitting in this room anymore. It's like, it is a fight, and we need to remind ourselves
and
that
it's not over. That's the important
Exactly.
thing. So we just have to find a way to practice feminism. We just have to find, like, a feminism that works for us in a way. And talking about the last phase, individual feminism, I just want to say how important it is to pick your battles. You can't fight every fight, and you shouldn't, because there are situations where it really just doesn't make any sense, and it's just going to be really draining, and you
still
want to go back
still
to the
got to be
killjoy.
protective of yourself.
Like
it's
self-care is
emotionally draining.
important. Your mental health always comes first. So, and then also what I think is really important to mention, guilty pleasures are okay. It doesn't make you a bad feminist. We all have a thing, like, if you want to listen to rap music or whatever, do it, you know. It's just,
if you want to watch Friends, you can do it.
No, I won't watch Friends.
Friends, don't watch How I Met Your Mother. That's, like, the worst show ever for me, but maybe that's a personal thing.
We totally lost, like, a lot of potential new members. Like, no, I don't watch Friends.
No. It's just, I feel like people are being also, like, self-proclaimed feminists. We're all, like, being very hard on ourselves because we expect feminists to be perfect, which they obviously aren't.
We're because it's
humans.
a movement. It's dynamic.
It's also it's a learning process. Like,
of course,
you don't always know
and
everything.
That's so important, and that's a point where I want to encourage new people to come, even if you don't, even if you haven't read, like, all the books about feminism, even if you don't really know what it is.
Single one,
you
you're
know?
like,
if you just want to make friends, it's a great way to make friends and learn new things along the way.
Go to the pub after.
Yes,
you know,
plug.
we're plugging everything.
No, but
honestly, we actually have. So this is our first episode of the academic year, and it's so exciting to have started this. I love this,
and I also want to say that we're all, like, at different stages and a different path and different journey, because shall we not forget that being a feminist means that has to intertwine with every other aspect of your life, in a sense. That is not, like, obviously harsh on yourself, but it means that it's not just something that, on Tuesdays I'm a feminist, but then on Wednesday morning I'm not anymore. It's important also to notice that if in one moment of your life you're not where the rest of the movement feels like it is, and it takes you longer to educate yourself and inform yourself on different things.
Exactly.
That's important, and that's fine. And maybe you're like, wait, I don't understand why this can be problematic. Although I don't like the word problematic, for lack of better wording. That's okay too, to just say, wait a second, okay, I'm gonna take a step back from my role and just read up on what other people are saying and form my opinion. And that's what's the most important thing, is just educating yourself too.
And also, no one expects you or us to have all the answers.
Exactly.
We just want to talk about it, because that's the only way we can educate ourselves. And if you make a mistake, don't beat yourself up. No. Just apologize honestly and try to make it better next time. But no one's going to kill you for using the wrong term or the wrong pronoun if you just don't know any better yet.
That brings me to the fact that we have a cancel culture session at some point in the term, where I think we're going to tap on this too.
Call out and cancelling. That's going to be interesting. And so just try to be inclusive and consider that there are intersections of marginalization, discrimination, and just try and be aware of that. Try to be aware of your own privilege, I would say. That's the main thing. in
Absolutely.
GenSoc for us.
And you will learn so much.
Like, just
Yeah.
respect everyone and you'll get respected back.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we're genuinely welcome anyone who's even got, like, the remotest interest in getting to know us and learning more about feminism. We've got our first official session on Tuesday, the 24th, and it's going to be a really good one.
Do you want
We've
to
got-
talk a bit about that?
I'll just quickly tell everyone what it's going to be about. We've invited Dr. Holly Davis from she's currently researcher at University of Edinburgh, and she's focused on sex and gender, sex work, the the way that we use language around those things, criminology, social deviancy. She's very well versed in everything. She knows so much. And she's going to come and have a guest interactive discussion with us on Tuesday. So please do come along.
We've
it's
also
going to be
invited
pretty dope.
Queer Napier, I think.
Yes. We invited Queer Napier as well, so it's going to be like a loosely co-hosted event. And it's in A55 at Merkiston campus at 6:30.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just going to wrap up the session by thanking all of you for joining me today for our first podcast. You're stars. And thanks for listening. And we hopefully see you all on Tuesday.
Yes.
Bye.